What's up, guys? Joe McCall, Real Estate Investing Mastery Podcast. Guess what I have right here? Woohoo! We're not in the real estate business. We're kind of in the relationship business.
That's why we invented this method. That's why we worked so hard on this book after 14 years. Everyone else is wired differently than you are. We are polar opposites. There's nothing wrong with that. No one has to change who they are. No one's wrong for how wonderfully awesome they're wired. One time a lawyer said, if both of you seem unhappy, then we're probably on the right track. I'm like, wow.
What's up, guys? Joe McCall, Real Estate Investing Mastery Podcast. Guess what I have right here? Woohoo! Come on. It's a book by my good friend Stacey Martino and her husband Paul called The Missing Piece. And this is a relationship book. And what on earth does this have to do with real estate? Oh my gosh, check this out. A proven method to single handedly transform your relationship. And I would say your business, I would say your wholesaling business, and create harmony in your home. Now, Stacy is a friend of mine. We go back years and years as part of a mastermind that we were in. And you're still in Boise, Stacy, is that right?
Yep. Yeah, we're
Okay.
here. We love it here.
We've hung out in many, many different masterminds together. And it's been so cool to watch her and her business just really grow and expand. And their main thing that they do is they help people with their relationships and their businesses. But Stacy has been in the real estate business for a long time, and she knows how to do creative real estate deals and wholesaling and rehabbing. And that's probably one of the reasons why she got into the relationship business, because she realized what a nightmare real estate is, and she probably saw so many wrecked marriages in it. Anyway, I'm just kind of being funny. But she's just written this incredible book, and this book is thick. I'm excited about going through it here. But I can tell you this was not written by AI. This was written, I'm sure, Stacy, by a lot of bumps and bruises and real
Blood,
life
sweat, and tears.
experience, a
Yes,
lot
sir.
of blood, sweat, and tears, you and probably Paul, the things you've
Mhm.
gone through, but also the countless number of people that you guys have helped. So welcome to my podcast. Welcome to my real estate investing podcast, Stacey.
I'm excited to be here, Joe.
To put some context to this, I did an interview with a guy, I don't remember, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. He said something that stuck with me for years. And it's like, we don't measure success by how much money we made or how many deals we've done. We measure success by how many hugs that we get. And I thought, what does that mean? And I asked him to explain. I wish I could remember where that podcast was, but what he was talking about was, we're not in the real estate business. We're kind of in the relationship business. And it's about relationships. It's about relationships with sellers, with buyers, with investors, with banks, with contractors, and all of that, right? So he measured success by when he is on an appointment meeting with the seller, does he get a hug or not at the end? And does that seller know, like, you know what, this guy cares about me? And it may not turn into a deal, but if he got a hug out of it, that's a win. And I thought that's such a great philosophy. And when Stacy said, hey, finally came out with this book, and I got it, and I said, I want to get you on the podcast because let's talk about how this relates to real estate. How does it relate to, and one of the things that Stacy always talked about in our masterminds, I should say this too, was we all speak different languages, right? Like we say different things and we mean different things and we hear different things. And like, how do you learn how to speak in somebody else's love language, I guess, something like that. So I'm not the
Yeah.
expert, but I'm glad you're here, Stacy.
I'm so happy to be here. I mean, I love this. I could talk about this all day because, when you think about what we do in relationship, most people immediately go to marriage. And yeah, like I don't think anybody has ever been as successful with helping people save and transform their marriages as we have. That's why we invented this method. That's why we work so hard on this book after 14 years of helping thousands and thousands of people around the world. And marriage is the toughest relationship because it's long term and it's your primary, right? It's your 24/7, no end in sight, 7 days a week relationship. But in business, you have long term relationships as well. I always say if it's short term, if it's somebody you're never gonna see or hear from again, yeah, maybe you can get away with not having relationship skills. But anything that's long term, that is where we come in. Because the truth is, in long term relationships, Every time there's a kerfuffle or an upset or a disappointment, Paul and I use this metaphor of saying it's like another brick goes in the wall between us. And sure, when you've just met someone, you're never going to see them again, you can get away with that. But boy, in a long term relationship, like those bricks start going in the wall. And if you don't have the skill set to take them down and get the skill set to stop having them inadvertently go in the wall, you're going to be dealing in the results of that, even though you show up with the best of intentions. What the big piece that people are missing, and what we put in our book is exactly what you started to say, Joe. It's that everyone else is wired differently than you are. And if you don't know how to wrap your communication and interactions with them for how they're wired, for how they hear it. If I was speaking to someone whose primary language was French, doesn't make one of us better and one of us worse. It's just if I want them to actually understand what I'm saying the way that I meant it, I have to wrap it in the language that they understand. And a lot of what we teach is understanding how different people are wired, how to wrap what you're saying in a way that they can receive it the way that you meant it. Most of the kerfuffles that people have, especially between masculine and feminine, we are polar opposites. There's nothing wrong with that. No one has to change who they are. No one's wrong for how wonderfully awesome they're wired. But if we don't learn these how to build a bridge between these two, then what happens is without any negative intention at all, when you say something that would not totally not trigger someone who's wired just like you, it will unknowingly trigger and honestly break rapport with the person who's not wired like you. And in a business like real estate, you are in the people business. That's what this guy was trying to say. He knows what business he's in. Look, we'll always have assets and things that we can do. And sure, do you need a craft skill set? Of course, you need a craft skill set. You need to learn that. And if you don't have the people skill set, you can only ever go so far. And in real estate, not only is your human to human skill set going to dictate your results, your bank balances, your expenses. Are things expensive or are they not expensive? Whether something can get done or not, all of those things. But it's also about your fulfillment, which is also, I'm sure, what this guy was talking about. When you do enough transactions, you know, some transactions can be soul sucking, and others make you feel like you would have done that for free all day, every day, because you did a great thing. You took your resourcefulness and you applied it to a situation that really changed that person's life. Maybe is even the difference between where they're going on their next step, thanks to you getting involved in that transaction. And when you can do that, you have like the Quan, right? Like from Jerry Maguire, you have the assets, you have the financial growth, you have the lower kerfuffles, you have harmony, but you also have fulfillment. And you know what, in relationship in real estate, which is a relationship business, unless you think you're always going to find another broker, another contract, you can't just keep swapping people out because you're burning through them. We need to have rapport building skills, we need to have relationship skills, but more importantly, we definitely need to get all the missing pieces of the puzzle so we stop unknowingly breaking rapport when we think we're showing up with the best of intentions to do the best that we can, but without us realizing it, we're breaking rapport. And
Yeah.
boy, does that have a boomerang.
Oh, and it's important. It's important again with when you're dealing with sellers, when you're dealing with buyers. First of all, though, I want to mention this book again, and if anybody wants to get it, where do they go? In case somebody can't listen to the rest of this podcast or whatnot, where do they go? Nice. So know the missingpiecebook.com. They can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anything like that. But if they go to your website, you get a bunch of bonuses, right?
Yeah, we wanted to give you a great reader experience, so we put a whole bunch of bonuses to make it even easier, giving you the tool cards for stuff that's in the book so that you have it handy and all the things so that you can use it.
I want to talk about marriage and relationships with our spouse because that's really important. But I want to tie this into real estate investing because this is a real estate investing mastery podcast, right? And but I want to ask you like Your background, you have a lot of real estate in your background. Talk about that for a minute, would you?
Yeah, so actually, before I accidentally figured out this relationship method, which was totally not what I expected to do with my life, I was an accountant and I started in real estate when I was 14 years old. My
Wow.
whole family is in real estate. So I was like selling real estate and then handing it off the deal to a family member who would continue with the close. But I like started, I don't know if you remember Carlton Sheets when we were kids, like on
Yes.
the infomercials and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how I bought my first house in the
Really?
90s. Yeah, I was a young single 20-year-old girl and I bought my first house as a rehab. It was sinking. It was a bank-owned property sinking into the ground, but it was on half an acre in a town that I could not afford to buy in. And so I did rehab. I gave them like a 50 cent on the dollar offer. And
Wow.
it literally gave me, when I sold that, it gave us the deposit to buy the house where Paul and I married and raised our children. And we would never have been able to end up there as young as we were if I hadn't flipped and, rehabbed and lived in and flipped that first house when I was a youngster.
Well, I have some Carlton Sheets books right over there on my bookshelf, and some Robert Allen, and some of those. And it's funny because I was looking at those books recently, and 99% of the stuff they talk about in that book still applies today in terms of strategies and how to make offers and how to negotiate with sellers and all that. All right, so you've also done other types of deals since then, but that first deal was profitable. It sounds like.
Yeah, that really set me up, like, because you know how it is. It's you that when that first deal gives you the cash flow, then you're off and running. Like that's what you use for the next and the next, and it more than anything also taught me how to think about properties and assets and how to bring value into that asset. And it also taught me, and I started learning about negotiation and about really creating a win win. That's actually what it took for me to get that bank owned property. And I think that's also reflected in the quote that you shared just before, where if you got a hug, that receipt of getting a hug truly is a receipt of showing, like, if we were to put that into words, is like, hey, this was a win for you, but this was also a win for me. That is the win win where nobody feels like they lost. And it's such a shame that in so many areas of business, people teach the win lose, like dominate other people, get over on other people. And I think people who are in real estate and are in the business of humans learn pretty quickly, boy, if you don't know how to create a win-win-win for the seller, the buyer, and everyone involved in the transaction, that's going to haunt you. The boomerang on that is going to be nasty if somebody feels like they lost. It can haunt you. It can destroy future deals. It can destroy, and we've all been through those boomerangs that are just have a nasty backlash. And actually, there's several chapters in our book because, of course, in marriage and in family, learning how to create the win-win is a skill set that most people don't have, but there's some really great strategy in here that I would say could be used in any deal.
Well, let's talk about some of them. What are some of your favorite strategies?
Well, first of all, one of my favorites, which is really contrarian to what most people say, is looking at compromise differently. Because most people say, especially in like if you think about marriage relationship, family relationships, you have to compromise, you have to be willing to compromise. I can't tell you how many times I have heard that in real estate as well. It's like, hey, make sure there's a good compromise. One time a lawyer said, if both of you seem unhappy, then we're probably on the right track. I'm like, wow. Wow. I am not in the legal business, but in the real estate business, in the relationship business, if anybody feels like they are losing, then it's a lose lose. Like what Paul and I teach is that there really is no win lose in a long term relationship. Win lose only exists in a short term relationship. I'm never going to see you again. But in a long term relationship, if anybody feels like they lost, then you both lost because the relationship, it starts to take a hit. They increase their distance from you. They don't want to work with you again. Maybe they say something to someone else. The next time you really need something to go quicker or to work out, they're not there for you. Like in a long term relationship, anytime somebody feels like, hey, I lost that one and somebody else won, the distance increases. It's a rapport breaker. Another brick goes in the wall, and the win lose is really the lose lose. And so, what we teach is the win win. The first step in being able to ever design a win win is first to stop using compromise or even fairness, looking for fairness, which I get that compromise is like a step up from one person always getting their way and everybody else losing. I get where it comes from, but what was once progress is now becoming primitive because in long term relationships, it just doesn't work. It's like shooting holes in their side of the boat that you're both standing in and saying, hey, your side of our boat is sinking. Like, well, it's a lose lose. But one of the things that I share in the book, and I will share right here because I just believe in it so passionately, is that most of the time when you find yourself in a stalemate, which everybody has, everybody's been in that situation where they're like, look, my way and their way are mutually exclusive. We both can't get our way. And this is usually when people default to compromise, which deteriorates the relationship. It's never worth it. What I would invite you to look at is that most people do the win win backwards, or they try to, which is why it fails. They try to get to a win win backwards by looking at my way and their way and trying to see who can get their way. And that is not the steps. That's not the order of alignment to use for getting a win-win. And usually what happens is people are focused on the how, right? How I load the dishwasher versus how you load the dishwasher. How I think our kids should go to school versus how you think our kids should go to school. How I think we should spend the holiday versus how you think we should spend the holiday. And when those hows are mutually exclusive, that's when we end up in a stalemate. That's where we try not to talk about it or we go into compromise or something else. So I would say my second strategy is first of all, don't give up, because almost every stalemate that any student has ever brought us, we have been able to help guide them to creating a win-win solution. There's always a win-win, and the first step is to let go. You don't start with the how. How is last. The first step is to actually start with the why. So ask somebody. I get how you want it to be. Why is that important to you? Why do you need that? Not in a way that I'm challenging you,
But by the way,
right?
guys,
Not
I
be
hope you're this is so good, and I hope you're paying attention, and she's talking about relationships, but this and I want you to keep on talking about relationships because that's what this book's about. But listen to what she's saying and how you're talking to sellers. You're like, why do they want to sell the property? What are their goals? Why? It's like, so
why.
I hope you guys are picking this up. This is so
I
good.
love this. I'm so glad you said that, Joe. So you want to get to their why. Now, of course, be careful with your energy when we talk about relationship skill sets and rapport building. Man, our people are so hypersensitive. If you're looking to get somebody's why, just so you can shoot a bunch of holes in it, tell them why they're wrong, they're going to button right up. Nobody wants that. We're not stupid anymore. Your sellers are savvy. They're also on the defense. They're trying to protect themselves. Like when you're dealing with somebody who's in protection mode, you have to have a tremendous level of relationship skill sets and rapport building. But if you can actually access your curiosity, so the energy you want to bring is curiosity, and because you're looking for gold that you don't have yet, I can promise you, I've done this thousands, literally thousands of times. You're looking for gold that you don't have it. I promise you. It's not like, oh, it's obvious and they just don't see it yet. No, you don't see it yet. And this is why you're asking the question, because you're going to find something amazing. When you ask them, like, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to sell? Why do you feel like you need to sell? Why now? Right? So you start with why. That's number one. Number two is what, right? What do you need? What is the outcome you need from this? If we were to make a wish list of everything you could get out of this, what do you really need? Now, if you have somebody's why on a post it note and you have somebody's what on a post it note in front of you, like there are a million hows. That's where your craft comes in. You are the source of hows, right? You know all the hows. And you may find usually people come into things with a white knuckle grip on their house. This is both in marriage, in parenting, in real estate, in family of origin, doesn't matter where you go. People white knuckle grip their how because we are so convinced that our how is the only way to get to happiness or safety or comfort or whatever that person's looking for. But when you say, okay, like let's just say we do this in a way that you're going to love it. Now, why? Like let's talk about why so that I can make sure I fulfill on everything for you. Go through the why, go through the what. With a why and a what, you can come up with so many creative hows that meet the why and the what. And if you start off by challenging someone's how, they're going to immediately go into resistance. Now you're on one side of the fence, they're on the other. But if you embrace their why without resistance, and if you embrace their what without resistance, the fence comes down. Now you and the other person are standing on the same side of the fence. We're building alignment, we're building rapport, we're building trust. And now we say, okay, so I have like three different hows that can meet this why and this what. Let's use this why and this what as a checklist. These are all the different ways. Which of these feel the best to you?
I love that. And you know what? One of those hows may not be for you to buy it.
That's right.
And it's like one of the things I do when I'm talking to sellers, I'll give you an offer, but if my offer doesn't work, I'm going to give you the names and numbers of 5 different realtors that you can sell your properties to. You know, they can help you. What I'm trying to say is like this, it's amazing to me how the sellers are shocked that you're actually trying to help them and not trying to be like a vulture coming in to take advantage of somebody in a bad situation. But when you actually come to this quote unquote negotiation, I don't like calling it that, but when you're trying to help them, you'll be amazed how quickly their walls come down and they're more open to what you actually have to offer. And they're more
That's right.
open to consider your offer when you give them alternatives that you don't get any benefit from. Right. You know what I'm saying? Because then
That's
they're
right.
like, oh, well, this guy is actually pretty nice. And many times, not many times, but there will be times when they come back to you and say, you know what? We tried to sell it, we couldn't. We'd rather just get rid of it. And because you were so nice and helpful, we'll let you buy the property, even though they may have offers higher than yours, but because they like you and trust you, then
That's
they'll
it.
sell the deal to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, because you built trust in the process. And that's the difference between
And
not
they
having a
felt heard.
relationship. Oh, of course. Yes,
Yes.
so much so. So much so because when you have these relationship skills, they're dropping their resistance to you. What most people do is they speak from their own blueprint, how they're wired, the way they would say it, what they would want to hear, and other people's resistance to them goes up. And especially when you're in a deal, a real estate deal, where I'm sure there are plenty of people swimming around them who don't have their best intentions at heart. So now we have to figure out a way to show that we have their best intentions at heart, which is why instead of negotiation, you can think of it as like, this is like a puzzle. And I'm here to try to figure out if there's a win win in this equation. Like with all these puzzle pieces we have, is there a win win in here? And if there is, great. If not, I'm going to show you what I know so that you can make a win win somewhere else, right? And when people really believe you, which is why your energy, your intention, your own mindset, how you think about it, these are critical. They are so critical. And your skill set, you have to have the skill set, like what Joe's teaching you, of how to be creative. Because if you only have one how can you possibly enter into an exploratory creative exercise? That's the same as the person who's white knuckle gripping how they need that dishwasher loaded. Like you
I love
can't
this
be creative.
because there's a when you're talking to a seller who owns a property, you could give them 3 different hows. And I love this analogy because I used to frame it like kind of 3 questions that you should ask every seller. And it kind of relates to this, but the first one is, what's your situation? Not tell me about the house. I want to know what's your situation. The second question is, what would you like to see happen? And then the third question is, when would you like to see that happen? That kind of relates to the first, the why and the what, right? And then when I know those three things, then I can present the house. And one of the things I like to do is give the seller some options. Number one, here's a cash offer, and I can close in 30 days, but it's going to be a real low price. Second option is maybe a higher price if you'd consider some kind of owner financing, if I could buy it on creative financing. And then the third option would be I'm just going to give you 5 realtors that you could call that can maybe list it for you. And do you see how when you come to the seller with that approach, it's so much better because it's not this combative like a hardcore negotiation thing. And it doesn't matter to me which one you pick, Mr. Seller. I just want to help you get rid of this property. And if now doesn't work, maybe another time will, or maybe somebody else can help you. So good. Do you have any other good rapport building skills? Good ways to build bridges?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think anyone has experienced when somebody breaks rapport. And like there's not enough rapport building skills I can give you to overcome rapport breaking pattern. So if you don't know what the rapport breaking patterns are that you're doing, you have to start there. And literally, like, I can't even tell you how many we put into here. You'll see them because there is, I mean, basically, the discovery that I accidentally stumbled upon over 20 years ago is that there's this old way of relating to other humans that people have done for thousands of years that are just patterns that people are still doing today, but it doesn't work today. And so, like, when you try to do things like that are based on the win lose, or when you try to like lean on somebody, or when you try to use leverage with someone, those things are immediately rapport breaking. But there's so much more than that, right? Because people are wired differently. One of the things that I love to talk about is that all humans have a different processing speed, how they process. And you're actually born, there's 4 processing speeds, and people are born with them, and I go into it in the book. Actually, it's really very useful with kids because so many times you have an easier time with some of your kids, and you have that one kid who's your gift, and very often it's because their processing speed is very different than the parent's processing speed. But if you don't know how to read somebody's processing speed within the first few minutes of meeting them, you could be going too slow and methodically because that's how you're wired, and they're like, this person is just not smart, they are not going fast enough for me, they are not getting to the important part fast enough. Whereas if you are someone who really processes very fast, but you don't pick up on the fact that they are a slow and methodical, or they are like more of a slow and cozy zen peaceful, you could be breaking rapport just at the speed that you're talking. Like, come on, right? So there's so many of these, and we go through dozens of them, of all these wiring differences in humans that we know. And the beauty is they are predictable patterns with predictable results. That's why, like, our method or the way that we teach is all patterns. It's what are you putting into the loop, a trigger, what comes out of the loop is a boomerang, right? Because all relationship is a closed loop. You put something into the loop, you're going to get something back. You talk to someone and they're rolling their eyes at you, you're gonna, you're going to react a certain way. You talk to someone and they're smiling at you, you're going to react a different way. But that's not going to change between today and tomorrow. It's a predictable pattern with a predictable result. When the pattern is invisible to you, you're getting what I know is a boomerang all day long that you don't like, and you're trying to fight with the boomerang, getting other people to change, or I don't like the way that they talk to me, or I don't like the way that went. When all you have to do is, if you learn these trigger boomerang patterns, you put the trigger that gets the boomerang you want into the loop. You can pre-select the reaction people are having to you all day long, and then you're really empowered to relate in a way
So
that doesn't break
how do you
down.
determine somebody's processing speed on the phone or in person? Yeah.
Yeah, you can observe them. You can see how they're speaking. So much comes through in voice and movement. Those are the two primary ways, the way someone talks and the way that they move. Right? So the 4 processing speeds, the first is what I call quick like bunnies. It's very quick, light, and bouncy. That is my processing speed, in case you couldn't tell. In fact, people who laugh in the middle of talking are usually that type 1 processing speed, quick, bouncy, light. The type 2 is the cozy, the slow pace, but also that cozy, very approachable, right? It's your kid who every single time they sit down has 5 blankets around them and a pillow. Like it's that zen, slower pace, very approachable, very comfortable, cozy processing speed. The third is the bulldozer. Very fast processing speed, but always pushing things forward, getting things done. It's not light and bouncy. It's still fast like I am, but it's forward driven. Like really, it's that powerful boom. People that we know, right? If you think of like a James P. Friel and the way that he talks or he laughs in a room, like it's very thuddy. And he has that fast talking, but it's very heavy, not like my fast talking. That's a type 3 processor. And then the fourth type is the slow and methodical. You'll know them because they are silent most of the time unless they must speak. So, like my husband Paul is that person. He can disappear in a room like you don't even know that he's there because unless there's a very clear reason to speak, he won't. And when he speaks, it is a slower pace, but there's nothing cozy about it. It's very methodical. They speak accurately, they measure 72 times and cut once. And just from those descriptions, you probably already are picking up the people that you work with, your kids, your spouse, and what they probably are. And just using something like being able to create a wrapper that matches their processing speed creates tremendous rapport, but more importantly, doesn't break rapport in a way that they have to like really work hard to connect with you because of how jarring or abrasive or annoying the differences might be.
When you find somebody, depending on one of those 4 things or whatever, does that change how you communicate with them? Are you kinda like mirroring? Is that the goal of this?
The thing about mirroring is that unfortunately sometimes people lose themselves and they don't really think of it the way that it could be a bridge. I like to think of the tools and skills that we teach very much are about creating a wrapper for that person to hear. And not you, like, I don't have to start being silent like Paul just to build rapport with Paul. But what I can do is wrap what I say when I'm talking to him in a way that it's easier for him, or even just pre-frame for him, like, I have a whole bunch of things to cover with you, and I'm going to probably default into talking a mile a minute about it because that's my way. So, like, brace yourself or tell me, like, slow down, right? So, even just that pre-frame acknowledges the difference. I'm not trying to be more like them. Nobody's wrong for how they are. But if I was in a deal, like for instance, with someone that was in protection and I wanted to build rapport with them, the whole goal is I'm not manipulating. I truly want them to feel more comfortable with me. I tell a story in the book about when our son was really young and I was totally stressing him out because he's a type 2 chill, slow, and I'm like all bouncing all over the place. So I would just take a deep breath before I approach him. I would center myself, which is good for me, to be honest. I could use a little balance.
Yeah.
And I would approach him a little bit more calmly and a little bit more easily so that I'm kind of like chocolate syrup for him. Like, I'm just like, it just feels great for him. He doesn't have to like brace himself for me. And now I'm wrapping my energy for him so that I'm not inadvertently breaking rapport. And honestly, sometimes, especially in real estate, sometimes people are in a really tough spot. And the best thing you can do to enter a conversation, find some ways to make them feel more comfortable really fast.
I've had 2 acquisition managers. I've maybe have hired a total of 3 or 4 different acquisition managers, but my 2 best ones were pastors, for either current or former part-time pastors. I just liked them because they were nice guys, and I hired them because I knew they were good listeners, and they had a way doing exactly what you're talking about here to really listen and be have genuine empathy and concern for the person they were talking to, and they were very successful in business because they were just such good listeners, and they weren't hardcore negotiating type of guys like, trying to close every deal. We're running out of time. I want to ask you a few more questions. Two more questions specifically. Number one, how do you recommend dealing with an angry seller or an angry buyer or somebody that is angry that you're interrupting their day or is angry that your offer is so low, and you weren't a jerk, you weren't coming at them, but you just caught them at a bad time, maybe, something's going on that you just don't know about. So what are some ways to that you recommend when you're dealing with somebody who's upset?
It's so funny that most people without skill set training, most people's natural reaction, the natural boomerang in that pattern is to get defensive because you're literally not doing anything. You're just trying to help out in your perspective and you're doing what you do for work, for your living, right? But the key is the skill set to use is to figure out how to align. Figure out how can you validate what is triggering them. They're not wrong, right? Think of if you stepped into their shoes, like the reason why your former pastors, right? We're so good at this. My executive assistant is a pastor as well. So I'm really familiar with that. Like is because there's compassion and empathy and if you lead with understanding like and I will just use myself in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, I was selling properties that I had to unload. I was underwater. And I will never forget a person who sat down at the table with his checkbook. And I remember saying to Paul as we walked in, I'm like, if this was a year ago, I would just pay cash for what this guy is giving us. But like, I would be so thrilled to write a check. And I hope I can do this for someone else. I hope I can
Mm,
do this for 10 more people next year. And I was so grateful. But I remember that feeling of being underwater. And remember that people can only show up with the skill set that they have in that moment. Number 1. Number 2, it's never about you. In fact, that is across the board. I study human dynamics for my livelihood. 99 whatever percent of humans cannot actually process things about other people. They process for themselves. So just keep in mind that it's not about you, it's what's going on for them. And find a way to align with them and validate how they're feeling. Not that you're wrong, but validate how they're feeling about their situation. That is always the first step.
okay, I like that. Okay, and we only got a few more minutes here, and this is a big topic, but working with your spouse. Let's talk about that. Man, there's 100 different directions this could go because it depends on her personality, your personality. But like, what are some tips? Because you worked with Paul for a long time. What are
Oh,
some tips you'd give to people in addition to reading your book, The Missing
yeah.
Piece, missingpiecebook.com? What are some recommendations you make to somebody who is working with their spouse in their business, or wants to maybe?
Yeah. Working with your spouse is a magnifier for your relationship. So, whatever skill set you have or don't have in your marriage will be magnified 100-fold when you decide to work together. So, the number one thing I would say is do not work with your spouse if you don't have the skill set. You have to have a relationship skill set because the worst thing you could do is sacrifice bricks in the wall in your marriage going up because you're spending more minutes in a day together in a work environment. When is that ever going to be worth a negative hit to your marriage just to work together? Never going to be worth it. Get the skill set. And if you are working together, get the skill set fast. You need to get those bricks out of the wall because I would say the most common dynamic I see and the worst shame that I see, the biggest cost in your entire business if you work with your spouse are the bricks that are going into your wall during the day in your job that are impacting your marriage. And I cannot tell you how many people have come to us when their marriage is over because of that. And when I asked them, like, was your business worth your marriage? Not in a million years. Not 40 businesses would not have been worth it, but they didn't see it coming. They did not see it coming. And I will also say the second thing I will say is it has absolutely nothing to do with personality. No relationships have anything to do with personality. These are repeatable dynamics. It is a skill set that has been missing. And the third thing is don't put your spouse in your business just because they're your spouse. If you wouldn't hire them for the role that they're in because it's the right person in the right seat in the bus, they shouldn't be in that role. So you don't have to work together if you don't have that skill set. Paul's background is in IT. My background is in tax. We both bring a skill set here, and we both build the content, half of the content. So like there was a reason for Paul to come in this business, not just so that he can retire from his corporate job. He could have been doing real estate instead of doing this business with me. There's so many things you can do, but please, gosh, prioritize your marriage. It's so much
Mhm.
more important than any business. Businesses will always come and go, but hopefully your marriage is for life.
You guys do these you've been in the relationship training business for a long time, and I don't think there's anybody that has a better track record than you guys do. But talk about some of the stats you guys have tracked. This will blow you away.
Yeah, so in a 6-year study of the students in our Relationship U program, they had a 1% divorce rate for those 6 years. Now, these are students that were 1%, right? The regular breathing divorce rate is like 50% right now in our country, according to some studies, higher for second and third marriages. 1%. And many of them had come to us after they were told by others there was no other choice but divorce. Some were in the process of divorce, living separately, been to multiple counselors, and they didn't just save a crappy relationship, they transformed it. But also, our students, as you know, like 90% or more of our students do multiple years of our training. So like we have multiple years where it's not the same training every year, but they come back again and again to get more skills because actually just like what we're talking about, sometimes they come in because they're like, I have to strengthen my marriage, and they focus on that for the first year, and then they might be like, hey, my kids are going through something, or I really want to bring this to my work and what I'm doing. And like, so next year they'll use skills to focus on that. And then, like, we have students that have been with us for many years, and then, of course, get trained as practitioners for our organization and start doing this. But yeah, more than 90% of our students do our events or our programs again. And people do not pay with their time and their energy and their effort unless it's proven, and our stuff is proven to be very, very effective. In fact, at our event, Relationship Breakthrough Retreat, almost half of our audience are repeat attendees every single time. We've been doing that event for over 10 years.
Wow. And you guys have helped thousands of people.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just a little tiny organization that just got started.
No, we've helped
You've helped
hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah.
hundreds of thousands. Oh, this is cool. Stacey, we could talk for hours about this. We got to go here, but thank you so much for being on the podcast. Again, missingpiecebook.com, MISSING book.com. And any other ways that people can get a hold of you or learn more about your retreats and your
Absolutely,
conferences and
yeah.
stuff?
Come check us out at relationshipdevelopment.org. We have lots of resources there. If you have questions that we can answer, we're always happy to do that. And yeah, you can check out our events and our programs and stuff there too. And thanks for having me, Joe. It's always fun to hang out and talk with you.
My pleasure. Say hi to Paul for me.
Will do.
And thank you so much, Stacey, for being on the show. Hey guys, appreciate you. If you've liked this podcast or this video on YouTube, depending on where you're watching it, give me a thumbs up, like it, subscribe to the show, leave a review. Appreciate it. And thank you again, Stacey. We'll see you sometime soon, probably.